Pretty loud. Okay, so 3.4 slope intercept form. So we're going to encounter all kinds of different types of equations in this chapter, and each equation is used for different things. So slope intercept is not new. Okay, the M represents your slope and the y-intercept is your B. That's where it crosses the y-axis. Now, when I ask for slope and say the slope was 4, I don't want you to write 4x. The slope is not 4x. The slope is just 4. If you write x, that's incorrect. Okay. And to write an equation in slope intercept form, you have to isolate the y. This is why we did the lesson a few weeks ago on literal equations, so that you would learn how to manipulate those equations and get them to where you want them to be. So let's look at this example right here. 2x plus 4y equals 12. I want you to rearrange this equation so that you are solving for y. All right, so we need to isolate y, so we're going to leave y here and get rid of everything else around it. So we're going to subtract 2x. Now, another common mistake that I see is that people will take 12 minus 2 and either make it 10 or 10x. But 12 and 2x are not like terms, so you cannot combine them. All right, so we end up with 4y equals negative 2x plus 12. And the reason I put my negative 2x first is because that's the proper way to write slope intercept equation. Okay, now to isolate the y, we need to divide everything by 4. And you can simplify 2/4 to negative 1/2 and simplify 12/4 to 3. And so then this is your slope intercept equation. And negative 1/2 represents your slope and 3 represents your y-intercept. Or another way to say it is that M is negative 1/2 and B is 3. Okay, I'm going to go over a little bit more of the vocabulary. In this equation up here, the x and the y represent an ordered pair on your graph. So say that you knew slope and you had an ordered pair, but you didn't know your y-intercept, you could always plug in all those numbers to figure out your y-intercept. So x and y are just an ordered pair on a graph. Okay. Anytime you have a vertical line, okay, remember we talked about zero slopes and undefined slopes. A vertical line right here has an undefined slope, and the equation is going to look like this right here. X equals 3. And all that means is that you're going to plot a point on the x-axis at 3 and draw a vertical line straight through it. Okay. And this is as far as you can go on the equation. There's nowhere else you could go except x equals 3. However, on a horizontal line, your slope is 0. So let's go down and look at this graph. This graph says y equals 3. So instead of plotting on the x-axis, you would plot a 3 on the y-axis and draw a horizontal line through it. Now, another way that you can write this equation is y equals 0x plus 3, because we said the slope is 0. And we plotted a point at 3 on the y-axis. So we know our y-intercept is 3. So this is another way that you could write that equation. Okay. And I basically just explained all of that right there. One other thing that I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of is that when you have a 4-quadrant graph, and I know you guys have learned this already, but I just want to make certain. This is quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. And so I just don't know if students coming new into, I know Mr. Mack taught it last year, but I don't know if our new students were taught this. But on one of the upcoming quizzes, it's going to ask if you had point -5, what quadrant would that be in? Well, you know, you go over -5 and then up to 7, so it would be in quadrant 2. Yes, did you have a question? Oh, no. No. Okay. I thought you had your hand up. Okay. Any questions about any of that before we go on? All right, let's go ahead and go to page 2. All you're doing is in this first section is pulling out the slope and the y-intercept. That's all you have to do. So remember, if our equation y equals mx plus b looks like this, and your slope is m, right? Your slope is always going to be before that x. Then you know that as you go down through these equations, you should be able to find your slope, right? So in this equation, 3 is my slope. And then my y-intercept is this one right here. So then positive 5 would be my y-intercept. Any questions on how to locate the slope and y-intercept? Okay. All right, go ahead and finish all that out. And then when you're done, I want you to check your answer up here. Okay, so I left a couple blank just because I want to go over them. But so let's go down here on the slope. We have 3, a half, -2, -3/4. Okay. And then we have this one right here. So this is just like the one on the other side that I said you could rewrite it into a slope intercept equation. What is the slope here? It's 0. So you could rewrite this as y equals 0x plus 4. And then your slope would be 0, making your y-intercept 4. Okay. What about number 3? What did you say? 0. Yeah, the y-intercept is 0. So this one could be written as y equals -2x plus 0. So if it doesn't show a y-intercept, that doesn't mean that there is no y-intercept. It just means that it's 0. So it's going to go through that origin. Okay. So, so the ordered pair here is 0, 0. Do you know what this ordered pair is called? Yep, this is the origin. Okay, it's the only origin, right? 0, 0. Okay, let's go down here to the next one. Okay, again, we have y equals mx plus b. If you need that reference, you can write it. Our slope is m. Our y-intercept is b. Basically, all you're doing is just plugging those numbers into the equation. So we have y equals m, which is our slope, 3, and our b, which is our y-intercept, 2. Okay. So you're just plugging all those in. So go ahead and finish that up. Again, this is review, so we can go a little bit faster. Zoom out. Go ahead and check these. I will say that typically we don't deal with fractions like this, especially when we graph. But for some reason, this curriculum has fractions as y-intercepts. So I'm going to show you in our notes how to estimate your graph when your y-intercept is a fraction. Are there any questions on this part? Okay. All right, let's go. Oh, that was my answer key. Let's go to the next page. There we go. Okay. Remember that first problem we did on the front page where we had to rearrange our equations in slope-intercept form. You're going to be doing that for the remainder of the lesson. You're going to rearrange all of your equations. Then you're going to plot a point for your y-intercept and graph your slope. That's pretty much what this whole lesson is. So let's look at this first one. We have 4x plus 2y equals 10. We want to isolate this y, so we need to get rid of this entire term. And the way that we're going to get rid of it is by subtracting 4x on both sides. Okay. So we're left with 2y equals -4x plus 10.
Why do you put?
What do you mean?
Like I thought it would just be like 6.
Okay, so I explained this on the first page. Why would we, can somebody say why we would not combine these, Jake? They're not like terms. One has an X, one doesn't. Good, thank you, Xavier.
Would the 4x always be in front of the 10?
Yeah, so you always want your slope to come first. So in the equation, y equals mx plus b. So your slope is first. Yeah. Okay, now what we need to do is still isolate this y, so we need to get rid of the 2. So we're going to divide every term by 2. Okay, and we end up with y equals negative 2x plus 5. Then what you do, I'm just going to write, sometimes it helps for me to write my y-intercept and my slope out. Sometimes it doesn't. It just depends on how you graph. But my y-intercept is 0, 5, and my slope is negative 2. So I'm going to plot a point at 0, 5, and then I'm going to graph my slope by rising 2 and running 1. So up to the left one. Now, somebody earlier said, why are you rising? Why are you going up instead of going down? And it's because when I go up and it's negative, I have to go left. So remember that you can still go up when it's negative. You just have to, instead of going right, you go left. Okay. And then I'm going to draw my line. And yes, I want you to draw your line. All right, we're going to move on to example 12. So again, we want to get rid of this 5x. So I'm going to subtract 5x on both sides. And I'm left with negative y equals negative 5x plus 10. Now, we have to get rid of that negative in front of the y. We can't have that. So what are we going to do?
Times what?
What'd you say?
Add.
Yeah, divide by the negative 1. If you divide, this is like a negative 1y. So when we divide it, we get rid of it. So we divide everything by negative 1. Be very careful with your signs on this lesson. Okay, so here's my equation. My y-intercept is 0, negative 10. And this is how I want you to write your y-intercepts. Write them as ordered pairs. And your slope is 5. Okay. So I'm going to plot a point at 0, negative 10. And then graph my positive slope of 5. 5 over 1. Okay, and then graph my line. When you're writing, if it asks for the y-intercept, yes, you need to put the 0 in front of it.
So it's asking for
0, negative 10. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next page. I want you to try examples 13 and 14 on your own. Once you have the process down, you probably will be able to complete all of these. But until then, if you still need some guidance, just go along with me. But I want you to try 13 and 14 on your own, and then we'll come back and check those. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do these because it looks like some of you are still struggling with the concept, and I want to make sure everybody understands. So on this one right here, we need to isolate the y, so we're going to get rid of the 3x by subtracting 3x on both sides. So we end up with negative 2y equals negative 3x minus 6. And then we divide both sides by a negative 2. Okay. And then once we do that, you should have y equals a positive 3/2 because 2 negatives right here give you a positive. and then plus 3 because a negative divided by negative is positive. And so once you end up with this, your y-intercept, is 0, 3, and your slope is 3/2. Okay. All right. And then is there anyone still working on 14? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and put 14 up here. You guys can check your work on that one. Oh, okay. 14, we do have a fraction. Hold on just a second. So we're gonna subtract 3x and then we end up with 5y equals negative 3x plus 7. Okay. Right, so your y-intercept is 7/5 and your slope is negative 3/5. Okay, so when you are figuring out your y-intercept, I always like to turn this into a mixed number, just so I can see between what two numbers it will be in. And this is 1 and 2/5. So I know that I'm going to plot a point between 1 and 2. Now, when you write your ordered pair, though, keep it as an improper fraction. So this should be 0 and 7/5. Keep it as an improper fraction. But I'm going to plot a point on the y-axis at like 1.5. Okay, it's not going to be perfect or exact. Then when I graph my slope, I have to go up 3 and to the left 5. So I'm going to be, when I go up 3, I go up from 1.5 to 2.5 to 3.5 to 4.5, right? And then I go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So not this one. That would be my next ordered pair after I graph it. So just make sure that if you plotted your y-intercept in the middle of two numbers, that every time you go up 1, you're going in between the next two set of numbers. And then your slope should be like this. And don't worry about being exact or anything. You're gonna on these types, but try to draw straight lines. All right. Well, why don't you go ahead and work on 15 and 16? And then we'll come back to check those. So this one did not require a whole lot of work to get the equation into slope intercept form. So that's what you should have gotten once you did that. And the next one is kind of the same way. Let me give you another minute. I'm going to subtract x. I get y equals negative x plus 7. That's it. So my y-intercept is 7 and my slope is negative 1. And, oh, wait. Paige, was yours a negative slope or positive? Any questions on that? All right, let's go ahead and flip the page to the last 4 problems. I put these on here because 1, there's going to be some more fractions, and 2, you won't always get the same type of equation. So if you look at this one, Instead of your X being over here, your X is over here, but the process is still the same. So you have to isolate that Y. So you get everything else on the other side. So in this case, I have to get rid of the -6. So I'm going to add 6 to both sides. Okay. And then everything else that we've done is the same. Divide by 3. And Y equals 4x plus 2. Okay. And then you can go ahead and graph that. Okay, for number 18, it is going to be a fraction, so I want you to try this one on your own, see if you could graph that y-intercept when it's a fraction and do your slope properly. So I'm going to give you a minute to do that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start on this one. So subtract 4x, and you end up with -7y equals -4x plus 15. So y equals 4/7 x. Okay, so I did this on purpose where you have two negatives. So make sure you're changing the sign if there's two negatives. And this would be minus 15/7. So here's my y-intercept and my slope is 4/7. So my y-intercept, -15/7 becomes -2 1/7. So all that means is I'm going to plot a point in between -2 and -3 on the y-intercept. So right here. And then when I go up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And notice I'm in between 1 and 2 here. And then I go all the way to 7. So I'm in between the two lines. Okay. Questions? Okay, this next one is a little different. Also, same process though. So we're going to get rid of our 2x. And we have -1/3 y equals -2x plus 3. Can anyone tell me what we have to do when we have to get rid of a fraction? And we have to do the same thing on both sides. Yeah, we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. So we multiply this side by -3 and we multiply this side by -3. Make sure you're putting parentheses around the two terms on the other side because that -3 needs to be multiplied by both the -2 and the +3 here. So when we do that, we get rid of our fraction on the other side and we're left with y equals 6x minus 9. Minus 9. So our y-intercept is -9 and our slope is 6. Just kind of process that for a minute. There's one like this on the homework. Okay. Can somebody tell me on the last one how we can rewrite this equation? Yep, y equals 0x plus 5. So that tells us that our y-intercept is 5 and our slope is 0. So we are gonna plot a point at 5 on the y-intercept, and then we just draw a line straight through that. This would be the only time that you don't need 2 points to graph a line. Is when you have a 0 or undefined slope. Right, and that concludes our lesson. Lesson 3-4,
On the final
3.4.
straight now. That's also-
Yes.
that also-